I have a simple but crucial question to deal with now. What is the difference between me believing that these are two vast, tamed fields that function like wings on the one hand, and me believing that they are simply two wooden pallets on the other hand?
The adequate contortions of the birth of a new scale of flight. The adequate contortions of the birth of a new scale of logical flight. The necessary contortions for the birth of a new scale of surgical flight. The necessary contortions for the birth of the scale of a new surgical flight.
I have a clear memory that in this very moment I was able to stabilize this imagination in me. My motions, my horizons, and the feeling of my own body were guided by this firm belief. In this next moment, I was not able to hold this modified belief. I was in the usual space with my usual understanding of the situation, doing some performative practice with two wooden pallets.
The necessary surgical elegance for the birth of a new scale of flight. The adequate surgical elegance for the birth of a new scale of flight. The adequate surgical elegance for the birth of a new scale of flight. The necessary adequate wings of poetical surgery, capable for this new scale of flight.
The song ended, and so I have to change it. It is certain that in this moment, I am not able to hold the belief I was designing before.
The necessary scale of surgical elegance for the birth of a new fluid of logic. The necessary logical elegance for the birth of a new scale of flight. The birth of a new scale of identity.
Before grasping the difficulty of a response, I need to restate the importance of this question. Everything I do and experience is governed by what I believe to be real. If this is so, why aren't we trained to cultivate the nature of this faculty? If I believe that Joseph Beuys, Anselm Kiefer, and Marina Abramovich are witnessing my performance now, I am certainly 1000% more focused. So why shouldn't I train my capacity to believe that they are here with me, regardless of the so-called real situation?
Designing the new necessary kind of flight. Designing the adequate.
Why shouldn't I desire a culture in which all children are trained to cultivate the nature of belief? Now let us allow Ludwig Wittgenstein to discourage us from the natural pathway of considering the nature of this difficulty. Because it may seem like a phenomenological performance, oh, if I could only work more, focus more, to believe this instead of this, then I would eventually succeed. Wittgenstein contradicts this image we have of belief as being an inner process, inner capacity, or experience. He would say something like this: what happens when a man believes something? Nothing in particular. Believing is not a process which goes on while something else is going on. The grammar of the word believing is not like that of eating or drinking. You can't point to a bodily or mental process and say, now he's believing.
Designing the right, the adequate kind of flight. Desiring the adequate kind of flight.
Okay, now let's ask the question again. Let's be clear. What is the nature of this struggle? It seems so hard to establish a different belief, a different reality. Why? Why is it so hard for me to move as if these are vast, wide fields, the wings of my new body, and not just some mere wooden pallets? What is the nature of the difficulty here? Do I lack the discipline, the concentration?
Well, to respond systematically, first we need to address the impression, the strong tendency to consider that a certain sentence is more realistic, more adequate to the objective situation. I am moving 2 wooden pallets is more realistic than I move my newly configured wide field wings. But why? Because I have a certain image of the world, and I believe that the vast majority of people in this situation would tend to say the first sentence when asked, "What is this man doing?"
But let's imagine I was raised in a community of architects that were always focused on the relationship between empty space and objects. Maybe most of the activities, motions, and speech would be configured like this. All that is done in consideration of the relationship between empty and full. And let's say I had such an image of the world that I would consider that all humans move and think like us. Then, my most immediate sentence in this moment could be, I needed to move like this in this very second, because the wind modified the shape of the tree, and I needed to balance the composition of space in this courtyard. If I were raised in a community of musicians, I could say, I moved like this because I heard a dog barking in the distance. So I needed to configure the echoes in such a manner that the sound would reach the window of my daughter. If I were raised in a community of painters, I might say, the clouds moved, the light changed, and so now the white color on the palette needed to be moved like this in relation to the tones of ochre and dark brown on the ground, and the spot of red of the little robin that just landed on that pole. If I were raised in a community of astronomers, I would say, Jupiter is moving in that direction. With such speed, this is why I needed to move like that.
Okay, I got the point. But where are you going with this?
All that I want to say is this. We might choose various sentences in various situations, according to our consistent habits and the language games we are used to. Some of them feel more obvious, and this is why they are considered to be more realistic, because we have a general consensus. The point I'm trying to make is that the obvious, realistic sentences do not have their privilege, their priority, based on their correspondence to reality. A sentence is not more true than the other because it is more in accord with the objective situation, the actual experience.
Okay, let's say we accept this. What is the consequence? What is the practical, useful conclusion to be drawn from this? The purpose of this investigation was to help me in my struggle to stabilize a different coherency of belief, a different logical plane, to understand why it is so hard.
Let's see. Maybe some useful conclusions to be drawn from this could be 1. Consider sharing this modified form of speech with the ones around you. If the people closest to you share similar forms of expression, if they fully understand how you use these words, and they also use them in their own ways, then they will be easier to stabilize. They will gain relevance, resonance, weight. They will become intuitively available. They will become stabilized with habit, with use, with their shared function. 2. You are recording yourself and sharing this on YouTube. You normally have a general belief about the viewers and their reactions. But imagine that your videos will be seen in the future by a number of people that will be participating happily into this reality you are trying to establish. Maybe systematically say to yourself, at the beginning of each session, that you are creating these videos for that desired future group of people that you're actually choosing and shaping in this very process. Just observe all the beliefs functioning in you and be sure to choose them consciously. At least this advice sounds acceptable. Quite common sense wisdom, right?
Understanding this new morphology of flight conceiving the energy architectures for this new scale of flight, conceiving the scales of capacity necessary for this fabric of flight. Conceiving the necessary stages for attaining the adequate bodies of a certain surgical, logical flight.